Welcome back to Uncensored. Israel is divided over its hostage deal with Hamas, which has now been extended for a further 2 days. One major poll found that 45% of Israeli Jews oppose the ongoing prisoner swap, while just 40% support it. Itamar Ben-Gvir, a right-wing security minister, called it a very, very big mistake. So does negotiating with terrorists weaken Israel's position, or should Israel's allies be pressing to make this ceasefire permanent? My next guests have clashed in the past on this show over the crisis in Gaza. Last time they appeared together, I said keeping the dialogue open is the only way forward, and they'd both be invited back. And so tonight, they're invited back. And I'm joined by Nerdeen, the activist and founder of the Palestinian community organisation Within Our Lifetime, and by the journalist and broadcaster Emily Austin. Well, welcome to both of you. Nerdeen, let me start with you, if I may. There's a pause at the moment. It's been extended by 2 more days. There are hostages being released back to Israel. There are prisoners being released back to the Palestinians. What is your view of where things should move from here?
I think it's important that when we talk about hostages to also understand that there are thousands of Palestinian prisoners that have been held in Zionist dungeons and Zionist prisons for years and years. And it's important that they are also freed, and that the 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza, which is effectively a concentration camp, are also being held hostage. So I think all hostages should be freed when we look at the context of Palestinians, prisoners, and not to call them hostages, but understanding that it's, you know, the same kind of line of thinking. All
right, Emily Austin, I mean, the thing about the Palestinian prisoners who've been in Israeli jails, I was shocked by not necessarily the age of so many of them, because I knew that a lot of young teenagers in particular had been rounded up for throwing rocks at soldiers and so on. But the fact that so many are being held in detention without charge, that makes me feel very uncomfortable. Are you comfortable with that?
Most of the prisoners that were part of this exchange were actually tried and, you know, convicted of the crimes, most of them being attempted murder. There is a narrative going around that there hasn't been fair trials, that they haven't been convicted, but that's simply not true. And there's one in particular that's going very, very viral on Twitter of Ahmed al-Mansra, who was convicted at 12 years old. This is a photo of him then, a photo of him now, and they're saying that he was abused in Israeli prisons. But if you look closely, you can see him stabbing 2 civilians at 14 years old. And a lot of them are calling this kid innocent just because he's a child. But at 14 years old, if you're stabbing civilians, you might be a child, but you're definitely not innocent. And contrary to what Nerdeen just said, there is no equivalency. This is not a hostage exchange. This is an exchange of criminals for children, okay? These are babies who are being held captive for someone who tried to stab a soldier. Another baby for another woman who tried to stab a soldier. Another baby whose crime was being a Jew versus another woman who tried to stab another soldier. Versus another baby whose crime is being an Israeli who was released for a woman who tried to stab a soldier. So I'm sorry, this is not a hostage exchange. This is a criminal exchange for our civilians back who were taken out of their homes.
Okay, Nerdeen, respond to that.
Thousands of Palestinians are held under administrative detention, which, as you said, means that they don't even get charged with anything, let alone a fair trial, and that these administrative detentions can be renewed every 6 months. And even when Palestinians are tried, oftentimes Palestinians are tried in military courts, and there's a 99% or higher than 99% conviction rate of Palestinians being tried in military courts. Children are not tried in military courts anywhere else around the world. On top of that, Palestinians get 20 years just for throwing stones.
Right, so Nerdeen, let me ask you about this question of a permanent ceasefire. Israel have just made it clear to me through their government spokesman they've got absolutely no intention of having any ceasefire. This war continues in their eyes until they have defeated Hamas. What is your response to that?
Is the murder of 20,000 Palestinians, 8,000 of them being children, not enough? You know, I think that no matter what they say, no matter who they're going after, there's always going to be Palestinian resistance. So that argument is essentially saying that they're never going to stop killing Palestinians and that they're completely justified in doing so.
Would you categorize,
look at the disparity between the rhetoric.
Would you categorize what happened on October the 7th as resistance?
Sorry, I didn't hear your...
Would you categorize what happened on October the 7th as resistance?
I would categorize it as resistance, and it's not
though,
my
is it? It's just
categorization
terrorism.
where that's coming
It's
from.
just terrorism.
Is there any categorization of Palestinian resistance, armed resistance, that you wouldn't categorize as terrorism?
I think when several thousand
that the US
people
and
storm,
Israel wouldn't categorize?
I think when several thousand people storm
Nurdin,
over a border.
Piers
Well, hang on,
is
let me
saying
just
is that murder is not
respond.
justified.
I think when several thousand people storm over a border and attack peace-loving people in kibbutzes and butcher them to death, raking people's heads off, killing babies, incinerating
Many of those people were killed by Israel itself.
But that is,
Israel
Nurdin,
actually,
we have to
came
agree
out that Israel incinerated a 12-year-old,
Fine, we have to agree,
Israeli
though,
girl.
before
it
we
was
get
Israeli
to
tanks that
soldiers.
incinerated
But before we
them.
get to Israel's response, you must accept that what happened that day was an act of terrorism, surely.
I don't live in a concentration camp, and neither do you, and neither does Emily. I haven't lived under the brutal conditions that the people of Gaza have had to endure for the better part of the last 2 decades. It's not up to me to tell people who are breaking free from a concentration camp how exactly they should do that.
All right,
and
Emily.
like I said, when Palestinians tried to do that
This is the
peacefully in
concentration
2018,
camp
they
that
were
she's
shot at.
referring
Right,
to.
let
This is
Emily
Gaza.
respond.
This is a very beautiful concentration camp that is Gaza, and it's a damn shame that Hamas terrorists are invading this very beautiful looking concentration camp. If only the Jews were that lucky to have such a beautiful concentration camp. Nurdin, listen. Piers, let's cut to the chase.
I can't
Stop
see
asking
photos
her
of
to
what's
condemn
being
October 7th.
shared, so
Stop
this
asking her to
is,
condemn
not-
October
this is not
7th when
fair.
she is borderline a terrorist herself. She herself incites violence. She herself protests and always incites violence and vandalism, even though vandalism is not protected by our First Amendment. So how do you expect her to condemn terrorism when she has openly said that it is an act of resistance and she continues to justify
Meanwhile,
it?
you're the one
and I
on
also
national
want to say,
TV
Nurdin,
defending the
Nurdin, I'm
murder
not
of
done
8,000
speaking.
Palestinian
I'm not done
children.
speaking. I was
I don't
about to
care
say
about
it
you
is a
speaking.
damn
I'm not here to
shame.
debate you.
And I don't care about you either. And I'm here to say, I'm just going to keep speaking.
Clearly
every
you care
single
about me.
life
You're
that
tagging
is
me
lost by
speaking
the
about
Don't talk
media
over each
all
other,
the
please.
time.
every single life that is taken on either side is abhorrent. It is atrocious, and I wish it would stop. Israel cannot stop until Hamas is defeated. Israel is the only military in the world that will knock on doors, send out pamphlets, send out alarms on roofs, and warn civilians to leave. And Hamas will
mean the
rather barricade
psychological warfare
their own
of
civilians.
pamphlets?
Emily,
The psychological
Telling people to go
warfare
Let me
is
ask Emily a
releasing
question.
hostages without their mothers and their
Emily,
siblings.
let me
That's
ask Emily a
psychological
question.
warfare.
Emily, here's my question for you. Is that I think there's a real danger for Israel of this happening sooner rather than later. That if they start attacking the south as well, as seems to be the intention after this pause is over, and the death toll of innocent Palestinians continues to skyrocket, and they can't produce any hard evidence, as they clearly can't at the moment from my last interview, of how many actual Hamas terrorists they're killing in the process, that they're going to lose the moral support and the high ground, and the global support for them will disintegrate for Israel. That is a real potential
disagree with
danger
you.
here.
I completely disagree. I think it's not Israel. Israel did its due diligence. Israel did its part. They warned civilians to leave. So all of the condemning that Israel is receiving, Hamas should be receiving, because they are using their own civilians, their women and their children as human shields instead of having them evacuate. Those who evacuated,
And we can
they
say
are
the same
safe.
about
You should be
October 7th.
condemning.
Why
You
are
should be
kibbutzes
condemning
placed
all
along
of
the border?
Let me go to
Arab
Nurdin.
countries
Kibbutzes are
who are
Don't
not
talk
letting
over each other,
Palestinian
please.
refugees in. That's who you should be
Don't
condemning.
talk over
not
each
the
other.
IDF.
Let me go to Nurdin for response.
We can say the same about October 7th. October 7th wouldn't have happened if Israel was not occupying Palestinian land, if there wasn't a siege and blockade on Gaza, if our land wasn't stolen from us. And this has been clear for so many years. Palestinians were talking about this, were protesting about this for years and years and years, while the world ignored them. Why are there kibbutzes next to Gaza's border? Are they a buffer zone? Are they human shields? Actually, it's Israel that's using Judaism and using its own citizens as human shields to mass slaughter, to mass genocide Palestinians.
And Nurdin, do you think, Nurdin,
let
me ask you a
call
question.
us terrorists, but it is Israel
Nurdin,
that has killed
let me ask you a
8,000
question.
Palestinian children,
Nurdin,
not the other way around.
Nurdin, do you believe Hamas should stay in
It's
power
Hamas.
in Gaza?
It's not
hang
Israel.
on, Emily. Should Nurdin, Hamas stay in power in Gaza?
I believe that Palestinians should be free. That's what I'm
That
here
wasn't
to
my
talk about.
question.
I'm here to say that.
That's not my
She won't
question.
answer your question.
That's not up to me. I don't live in Gaza.
You've got a very,
I don't live in
you have a lot of
Gaza.
opinions about this. Is your opinion that Hamas should stay in power? Yes or no?
I believe that Palestinians wouldn't need resistance groups.
All right,
if we
you're not
had
going to answer
freedom.
the question. All right, Emily.
So, no,
Piers,
that
can
is
I
answering the
ask-
question. Actually,
Well, you
and
haven't
I'll
answered the
finish.
question,
I'm not
Nadine. I've
done
given you
speaking.
several
No, it's not.
chances.
No, it is answering the question. Of course.
They either stay in power or they don't.
No, there wouldn't be a resistance group such as Hamas or itself in power if there wasn't anything to resist, if there wasn't an Israeli occupation.
Emily, last words to Emily.
Piers, can I respond, please?
Yes.
I want to debunk this occupation myth once and for all. Nerdine, when was the last time Palestinian had full sovereignty over the land of Israel? When was the last date that they had sovereignty over the land? When was the last prime minister? When did you have your own currency?
This is not debunking anything.
When
There's
did you have
clearly
a
an
Palestinian
occupation.
leader? Answer
There's
my
clearly
question.
a siege and blockade.
Why?
I'm not here to answer your
When
questions.
did they
You're a
occupy it for
genocide denier.
Palestine?
You're
Piers,
justifying
can you
on
ask
live
her that for
television
me?
the murder
Can you
of
ask
8,000
Nerdine
Palestinian
when
children.
did Palestine have sovereignty over the land, since she can't answer it from me?
That's a fair question,
My
Nadine.
Palestinian
She just called me a
family was
genocide
killed
denier.
off of our land.
This
was
is your
kicked off of our
genocide.
land.
This is
Our
this
history
is Palestinian
exists
population
in
growth.
Palestine
This is not a genocide.
for generations and generations.
This is not a
before
genocide.
1948.
You know the sad thing? You know the sad thing?
A genocide.
All right,
it's
time out,
colonialism,
time out.
it's occupation.
The sad thing about this is, at some point, we are going to have to bring the two sides together to reach a peace settlement. And yet every time I bring people from both sides of this debate together, this is how it goes. It looks completely
because
implacable.
she's using land as an excuse to kill
Let
Jews.
me speak to you
The
one-on-one,
land is not an
Piers. I don't know
excuse,
why
and
you're
the
bringing
land
this
was never
sports journalist
occupied.
who's obsessed with making
Oh, yeah,
taking
you
the
bringing a
attention on
terrorist
herself.
is better.
When
Nerdine, you are
Palestinians,
literally
can I
a
finish? Yeah.
terrorist.
Okay.
Sure, call me a terrorist on live television.
we've
Wonderful.
reached the-
But it was 3 Palestinian Americans
I
who
think
were
we've
shot
reached the end of
2 nights
civilized
ago. And
debate
this is
on this
important. I
debate.
want to say this.
Horrible.
I want to say
And
one
that is
thing.
horrible.
3
Okay, that's
Palestinian
enough.
Americans were shot here on U.S. soil for wearing
And
a
that is
scarf.
horrible.
Okay, I'm
So when
ending
you're
it.
calling me a terrorist
And
on
that's
TV
horrible.
and say that there's incitement against you, you're actually inciting
I'm
it
actually
against
going to
me.
end the
You just
interview now,
vandalized
the
a
debate.
public
The murder of 8,000
library.
Palestinian
You
children.
incited violence
Piers,
on
I can
myself
speak to you
and Piers
one-on-one
and
in the
Louise.
future.
All right.
But
Nerdine,
someone like
you
that
are
That's it.
will call
inciting
me a
violence.
terrorist.
That is
Emily,
terrible.
Nadine,
I
I'll
won't
leave you to
condemn
both continue
9/11.
shouting at each other. I'm sorry it ended like that. I want to have constructive debate. This doesn't get anyone anywhere. But I appreciate you both joining me again. Thank you.
Terrorist on TV.
Uncensored next.
هل أنت من البنائين الأحرار؟ هل أنت ماسوني؟
بشرفك. هلق انت جاي من اليمن وجاي تعمل لي مسرحيات وكذا يا زلمه، لك روح العب لك شغله ثاني. انا عم بسالك سؤال وكذا. ماسوني، انا ماسوني وصهيوني وسلفي وبراغماتي وحنفركوشي وشنكليشي وحنكليشي وقنطريشي. بدك غير هيك؟
جميل.
وصهيوني
الآن
اوكي
نبدأ
وبعصي.
نبدأ مسار
يلا جاوب على سؤالي.
أوكي.